The judge didn't look at my parents when he said it. He looked at me. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like everyone is holding their breath at the same time, waiting for something to break. And for a second, I thought I misheard him because for years, no one had ever said my name like that. Not with weight, not with recognition, not with a kind of authority that changes everything. And my mother's hand tightened around the edge of the table while my father leaned forward like he was about to correct him. Like this was just another mistake that could be fixed if he spoke loud enough. But the judge didn't repeat himself. He just flipped the page slowly, deliberately, like he already knew how this was going to end. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about them anymore. It never really had been. It was about everything they thought they could take without consequence and how wrong they were, but to understand why that moment mattered, you have to go back to a kitchen table that smelled like burnt coffee and unpaid bills back to the morning my father decided my life was negotiable. And before I take you there, if you've ever felt like you were giving everything while someone else got the credit, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always read those, and if stories like this hit close to home, go ahead and subscribe, but only if it actually means something to you. Because this isn't just a story, it's a pattern a lot of people recognize, and it started for me on a Tuesday morning when my father placed a folded piece of paper in front of me, like it was nothing more than a grocery list. "You'll need to pick up more shifts," he said without looking up, his voice calm, measured, the way he always sounded when he had already made the decision. And my opinion didn't factor into it. My mother stood by the sink hands, wrapped around a mug. She wasn't drinking from staring at the counter like she was waiting for the conversation to end without her having to be part of it. And Olivia sat across from me, scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention because she didn't have to. She never did. "Her tuition is due next month," my father added, tapping the paper once with his finger, not hard, just enough to make it clear this wasn't a suggestion and we're not going to let her fall behind. I looked down at the paper, 3 job listings already circled in blue ink, a coffee shop, a grocery store, and a night cleaning service, all within 10 miles. All hiring immediately, all paying just enough to keep someone exhausted, but not enough to get ahead. "That's 3 jobs," I said quietly, not because I didn't understand, but because I needed to hear him confirm it to make it real. He finally looked up, then, just for a second, and nodded, like it was obvious, like this was the most reasonable solution in the world. "It's temporary," he said, "until she's settled." Olivia didn't look up, didn't say thank you, didn't say anything all just kept scrolling, and my mother still didn't move, didn't speak, didn't meet my eyes, and in that moment, everything became clear in a way it hadn't before. Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't, because no one asked what I wanted. No one asked what I was giving up. No one even pretended this was a choice. I stared at the paper a little longer, then folded it once neat, precise, the way you handle something you're not allowed to break. And I said one word, okay, not loud, not emotional, just final, because arguing wouldn't have changed anything. And deep down, I think I already knew that this wasn't going to be temporary. This was going to be the start of something that would take years to undo, and they were counting on me not to notice, counting on me to keep going, to keep working, to keep giving without ever asking what it was costing me, but they forgot. One thing I was paying attention even then, even at that table, I was already starting to see the pattern, and more importantly, I was starting to remember everything. I did not start with 3 jobs. It never works like that. It starts small, almost reasonable, something you can explain to yourself without feeling like you are losing anything. The coffee shop was first early mornings from 5 to 9 before school, the smell of burnt espresso clinging to my clothes. While I sat in class trying to stay awake, my hands always slightly sticky from syrup no matter how many times I washed them. And at first I told myself it was fine. It was just a few hours. Just temporary, just until things stabilize. That word, again, temporary. My father used it like a promise, but it never came with a date. The grocery store came 2 weeks later, evening shifts from 4 to 8, stocking shelves under fluorescent lights that made everything look pale and tired. I would walk straight from school to work without going home, eating whatever I could afford during my 10-minute break, usually something cheap and quick. Something that filled the space but never really satisfied anything. And by the time I got home, my mother would already be asleep on the couch. The television still on my father in his office, with the door closed, Olivia upstairs door open, music playing softly, textbooks spread out like evidence of effort, even when I knew she had not touched them. For hours, no one asked how my day was. No one needed to. The system was already in place. I worked. She studied. That was the equation. Simple. Efficient. Final. The third job came quietly, almost like an afterthought. My father mentioned it one night without looking up from his laptop. "There is a cleaning company that needs help overnight," he said. "It pays cash." Like that made it better. Like cash meant freedom instead of exhaustion. I remember standing in the kitchen, still in my grocery store uniform, the fabric stiff and uncomfortable, my feet aching in a way that felt deeper than just being tired. And I nodded before he even finished explaining, because by then I understood how this worked. He presented, I accepted. There was no discussion, just progression. The next week I was cleaning office buildings from 10 at night until 2 in the morning. Empty hallways, rows of desks, the low hum of machines left running overnight. I would wipe down surfaces that no one noticed during the day. Empty trash cans filled with things people threw away without thinking. And sometimes I would stop for a second and look at the glass walls, at my reflection staring back at me under harsh lights. And I barely recognized it, not because I looked different, but because I felt different, like I was moving through someone else's life. One shift at a time, I started keeping everything without really knowing why, every schedule, every pay stub, every transfer receipt. When I handed the money over, I folded them neatly and placed them in a small envelope I kept at the bottom of my bag. Not out of anger, not yet, just habit, just awareness, because something in me needed to remember, needed proof that this was real, that I was not imagining it, that the hours, the work, the cost, all of it existed somewhere outside of my own exhaustion. And at home, nothing changed. Olivia talked about her classes, her future, her plans. My father nodded with quiet approval. My mother smiled in small, careful ways, and I sat there at the edge of the table eating whatever was left. My body present, my mind already calculating the next shift, the next hour, the next paycheck. I said nothing. I asked nothing. I just kept going because that was what they expected. And for a while, that was exactly what I gave them. Time stopped feeling like something that moved forward and started feeling like something I had to survive, measured in shifts instead of days and paychecks, instead of weeks in how long I could stay standing before my legs started to feel like they did not belong to me anymore. I stopped checking the calendar because it did not matter what day it was. Every day looked the same early alarm, the same rush out the door, the same cycle of work and silence and exhaustion. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized something else had quietly disappeared. I was no longer part of anything that felt like a future I was maintaining. Someone else's. Olivia's acceptance letter arrived in a thick, white envelope one afternoon while I was halfway through a double shift. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket, and when I checked it, there was a photo in the family group chat, her holding the letter, smiling. My mother's caption underneath, "We are so proud of you," with 3 exclamation points like pride needed to be amplified to feel real. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than I should have, not because I was surprised, but because I was trying to remember the last time that word had been used for me. I could not. I typed congratulations and sent it one word, clean, controlled, the way I had learned to communicate in that house. Olivia replied with a heart emoji, nothing else, and that was enough to close the moment. That night when I got home, the kitchen table was covered in papers, tuition breakdowns, housing estimates, numbers written in my father's precise handwriting. He was explaining something to my mother about payment deadlines, interest rates, timing. It sounded like a business meeting, not a family conversation. I stood there for a second, still in my uniform, my shoes leaving faint marks on the floor from whatever I had tracked in during the day, and he did not even pause, did not look up. He just slid a small stack of envelopes toward my side of the table without breaking his sentence, like I was part of the process but not part of the discussion. I picked one up, opened it inside my cash, folded tightly, ready to be deposited somewhere that had nothing to do with me. I understood. They had already decided where it belonged. Make sure this is transferred by Friday. My father said finally, still not looking at me. Her housing deposit is due. I nodded. Because that was what I did. I nodded and I moved and I executed, but something in me shifted then, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and precise, like a line being drawn where there had not been one, before I started noticing everything more. Clearly, the way Olivia talked about her classes, without ever mentioning cost, the way my mother smiled, when people asked about her daughter in college, the way my father referred to payments as investments, always investments, never sacrifices, especially not mine. I began to see the structure underneath all of it, the pattern, the assumption that I would continue without question, that I would keep working, keep giving, keep filling in whatever gap appeared, and for the first time, asked myself a question I had been avoiding, not out loud, not where anyone could hear it, but quietly in the space between one shift and the next. How long does temporary last when no one is counting? I did not say it. I did not challenge it. I did not change anything. I just kept collecting schedules, receipts, transfer confirmations, every detail, every proof. I did not know exactly why, yet only that it mattered, that one day I might need to show it to someone who could see what I had already started to understand, that this was not help, this was something else entirely, something structured, something intentional, something that had been happening long before I realized I was part of it, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I stopped feeling tired in the normal way, the kind that sleep fixes, and started feeling something heavier, something that stayed even after I closed my eyes for the few hours I could afford. My body adjusted before my mind did it, learned the black rhythm of standing, moving, lifting, cleaning, repeating until everything blurred together into a routine that did not need thought anymore, just endurance. And that was when something unexpected happened. I became invisible in a different way. Not just at home, but everywhere. At the coffee shop, I was just another person. Behind the counter at the grocery store, I was just another employee. Stocking shelves at the office buildings, I cleaned. I was not even seen at all, and for a while, that felt easier because being invisible meant no one asked questions. No one noticed the cracks. No one expected anything beyond the next task. But invisibility also meant something else. It meant I had space to observe. And I started to notice details I had never paid attention to before. The way managers talked about labor hours and budgets, the way schedules were assigned and adjusted, the way some people were protected and others were not the way. Everything had a structure behind it, rules that determined who carried the weight and who benefited from it. And one night, during a late shift at the office building, I was emptying a row of desks when I noticed a document left open on a computer screen. It was not something dramatic, just a spreadsheet, columns of names, hours, wages, but something about it held my attention. The precision of it, the way every number had a place, every hour accounted for, every dollar tracked. I stood there, second longer than I should have, just looking at it, and for the first time I thought about my own numbers, my own hours, where they went, how they moved from my hands into accounts. I did not control, I did not touch the computer, I did not need to. The idea had already settled in my mind. Everything leaves a record. Everything can be traced. Everything can be proven. And that thought stayed with me long after I clocked out and stepped into the cold air outside, my breath visible in front of me as I walked to the bus stop at 2:30 in the morning. The streets empty, the world quiet in a way that made everything feel sharper, more defined. I got home just before 3, the house dark, except for a light in my father's office. The door slightly open, his voice low, talking to someone on the phone about payments, deadlines, obligations. The same words, the same tone, controlled, deliberate. I paused for a second in the hallway, not to listen, but to recognize the pattern. The same structure, the same system, just applied in a different place. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. My bag still on my shoulder, the envelope inside, heavier than it should have been. Not because of what it held, but because of what it represented. I took it out, slowly spread the contents across the bed. Schedules, pay stubs, transfer receipts, each one a small piece of something larger, something I was only beginning to understand. I did not feel angry, not yet. I felt focused, like I had finally found the edge of something. I could follow something real, something measurable. And for the first time since all of this started, I was not just reacting. I was preparing. Quietly, carefully, I started organizing everything: dates, amounts, hours, building something that looked less like a collection and more like a record. Because if everything could be traced, then one day it could be shown. And if it could be shown, then maybe, just maybe, it could not be ignored. The more I organized everything, the clearer it became that what I was living through was not random. It was structured, consistent, almost methodical. The same dates every month when transfers happened, the same pattern of increased hours, right? Before tuition, deadlines, the same conversations at the table where decisions were made without ever being called decisions. And once I saw it, I could not go back to not seeing it. I started noticing the way my father framed everything. Always using words that made it sound reasonable, responsible, necessary, never once acknowledging the cost on my side, never once calling it what it actually was. And one evening, about 8 months into the routine, something shifted in a way had not expected. I came home earlier than usual because my night shift had been canceled. The building had closed for maintenance, and for the first time in weeks, I walked into the house before 10. The lights were on. Voices carried from the living room, relaxed, almost celebratory. I paused in the hallway, not out of habit this time, but because something in the tone caught my attention. Olivia was laughing, talking about a trip, something about spring break, flights, hotels, plans with friends, and my mother was asking questions, engaged, interested, the way she used to sound when something mattered to her. My father chimed in occasionally, calm, as always, but there was approval in his voice. A quiet satisfaction, like things were progressing exactly as he intended. I stepped into the room slowly, and for a moment, no one noticed me. I stood there in my uniform, my bag still on my shoulder, listening, and then Olivia said, "It casual." Almost absent, "I think I am going to use some of the extra money for it," she said, scrolling through her phone. Not even looking up. I mean, I have been working hard. I deserve a break. There was a pause, small but sharp. And in that pause, something inside me locked into place. My father nodded slightly, not questioning it, not correcting it, just accepting it as part of the plan. My mother smiled, soft and approving, and no one said anything about where that money came from. No one connected the dots out loud, but I did. Instantly, completely, every early morning, every late night, every hour, I had given condensed into a single sentence that dismissed all of it. I did not interrupt, I did not react. I just stood there for 1 second longer, long enough to understand that this was not a misunderstanding, not a temporary imbalance, not something that would correct itself over time. This was the outcome, this was the result they had been working toward all along. I turned without saying a word and walked back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat down at my desk, the envelope already in my hand, before I even realized I had reached for it. I spread everything out again. But this time it felt different. Not like I was trying to understand, but like I was confirming what I already knew. I added a new note at the top of the page, a simple line, the date, the observation, the connection. I wrote it, clearly, carefully. Like it mattered because it did, because this was the moment everything changed. Not on the surface, not in a way anyone else could see, but internally, structurally. I stopped thinking of this as something I was enduring, and started seeing it as something I was documenting, something that had an endpoint, even if I could not see it yet. And for the first time, I did not feel tired, I felt certain. I stopped waiting for something to change on its own, because nothing ever had, and instead I started making small decisions that no one noticed at first, the kind of decisions that do not look like resistance from the outside, but shift Everything underneath, I adjusted my shifts not to work more, but to work smarter, choosing locations where I could learn something, observe something, gather more than just a paycheck. The grocery store became less about stocking shelves and more about watching inventory systems, how orders were tracked, how shortages were flagged, how numbers told a story if you knew how to read them. The office cleaning job became something else. Entirely, I paid attention to what people left behind. Not physically, but structurally open. Folders, printed reports, discarded, drafts, nothing confidential that I should not see. But enough to understand how documentation worked in real environments, how people protected themselves with records, how decisions were backed by paper, always something that could be referenced later. And one night, as I was finishing a floor on the 3rd level, I ran into someone I had seen before, but never spoken to, a man in his 40s. Still at his desk, long after everyone else had left, he looked up when I passed by, not annoyed, not dismissive, just aware. "You are here late," he said, not as a complaint but as an observation. I nodded. "I usually am," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He studied me for a second, longer than most people did, then glanced at the stack of documents on his desk neatly. "Organized, clipped together, do you keep records of your hours?" he asked casually, like it was a normal question. I paused just slightly, not because I did not understand, but because I realized he was asking something different. Something layered. "Yes," I said. Everything. He nodded once, almost approving, then leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said. "Most people do not realize how important that is until they need it." He did not explain further, did not ask more questions, just returned to his work. But that single exchange stayed with me longer than anything else that week, not because of what he said, but because of what it confirmed, that what I was doing mattered. That the envelope in my bag was not just a habit, it was a foundation, something that could hold weight later, something that could stand on its own. I went home that night with a different kind of clarity, not emotional, not reactive, but structured. I added new sections to my records, categorized everything more precisely: dates, locations, payment methods, transfer confirmations, notes on conversations, exact wording when I could remember it. I stopped relying on memory and started relying on documentation, because memory can be questioned, but records, when consistent, cannot. And at home, nothing changed. My father continued to assign, my mother continued to agree, Olivia continued to receive. The system ran exactly as it always had, but I was no longer just part of it. I was mapping it piece by piece, quietly, carefully, until it was no longer something vague or emotional. It was something defined, something that could be explained, something that could be shown. And for the first time, I felt like I was not just inside the story, I was building the version of it that would eventually be told. It did not happen all at once. The shift, it never does. It started with small cracks that only I seemed to notice: delays in payments, tension in my father's voice. When he talked about deadlines, my mother asking questions she never used. To ask careful questions, measured like she was trying to understand something without admitting there was a problem. And Olivia stopped talking about trips and started talking about stress, about pressure, about how expensive everything was becoming. Her tone changed, not dramatically, just enough for me to recognize it. The confidence replaced with something thinner, something that needed support, and for the first time in a long time, the system they built began to strain under its own weight. One evening, my father called me into his office, not the kitchen, not the table, his office, the place where decisions were formal, where everything felt more controlled, more intentional. He closed the door behind me, something he had never done before, and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing for a second longer than necessary, then sat waiting. He did not start immediately. He adjusted a stack of papers on his desk, aligning the edges carefully, buying time. Then finally looked at me. "We need to discuss your contribution," he said, his tone calm but tighter than usual. I did not respond. I just watched him. "Olivia's expenses have increased," he continued. "There are additional fees." Housing adjustments, unforeseen costs, he listed them like line items, like variables in an equation that needed recalculating. We are going to need you to increase your hours. There it was, not a request, not a conversation, a recalibration. Nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I understood what he was saying, what he was not saying, that everything I had already done was no longer enough, that the line had moved again, that temporary had expanded without limit. How many hours, I asked, my voice even controlled. He seemed slightly surprised that I asked like questions were not part of my role, as many as necessary. He replied without hesitation. I held his gaze for a second, then nodded again. Understand, I said the same words I had used before, but they meant something different now, because I did understand completely. I left the office and walked down the hallway past the living room where my mother sat quietly. Past the kitchen, where the table was already cleared, everything in its place, everything appearing normal, and when I reached my room, I closed the door and did not sit down right away. I stood there, letting the moment settle, not emotionally. But structurally, this was escalation, clear, measurable, undeniable. I took out the envelope, opened it, and added a new section. Labeled it carefully increased demands. Documented the conversation, word for word, as best as I could recall the tone. The context, the timing, everything, because this was no longer just about what I was doing. It was about what was being asked, what was being expected, and how it kept changing without acknowledgement. And as I wrote, something else became clear. This was not sustainable. Not for me, not for them, not for the system itself, because systems built on imbalance eventually reveal themselves not through emotion, but through pressure. And for the first time, I could see where that pressure was starting to show, not in me, but in them, and that changed everything. The pressure did not explode. It tightened slowly, quietly, like something being pulled too far in too many directions at once, and eventually it reached a point where it could not be ignored anymore. It started with a phone call, late one evening, while I was at the grocery store, my father's name flashing across the screen, something he rarely did during my shifts. I stepped into the storage room to answer the hum of refrigeration units, filling the silence between his words. "We have a problem," he said. No greeting, no build-up, just a statement, controlled but sharper than usual. I did not ask what kind of problem. I already knew. It was financial. It was always financial. Olivia's account is short, he continued. There was a delay with a transfer, and the university is threatening to place a hold. I leaned against the metal shelf behind me, listening. "How much?" I asked, my voice steady. 3,000, he replied. The number sitting in the air, like something expected, something inevitable. "I need you to handle it tonight." There it was again. Not a request, not even an assumption, just a directive. I closed my eyes for a second, not out of emotion, but to mark the moment, to recognize it for what it was: escalation. Clear and immediate. "I do not have that amount available tonight," I said carefully, because accuracy mattered. Now every word mattered. There was a pause on the line, longer than usual. Then his tone shifted slightly, but enough for me to notice. "Then you will need to find a way," he said, each word measured, controlled. "This cannot wait." I did not respond right away, not because I did not have an answer, but because I was choosing how to give it. "I will transfer what I have," I said finally. "The rest will take time." Another pause, this one heavier. "That is not acceptable," he replied. And for the first time, there was something else in his voice, not anger. Not yet, but strained, something that suggested the system was no longer as stable as he believed. "It is what is possible," I said calmly. And then I ended the call before he could respond. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just final. I stood there in the storage room for a moment longer, the cold air pressing against my skin. And then I went back to work, finished my shift, moved through the rest of the night exactly as planned, but internally everything had shifted again. Because this was no longer about contribution, it was about demand, under pressure, about urgency being placed on me without regard for capacity, and that changed the structure of everything. When I got home, I did not go to bed immediately. Sat at my desk, opened the envelope, and documented the call in detail: the time, the amount, the exact wording, the tone, everything. Then I added something new, a column I had not used before, labeled immediate demands. Because this was different from what came before. This was not scheduled, not planned. This was reactive, unstable, and systems that become unstable reveal their weaknesses quickly. I organized the data, cross-referenced dates, compared patterns. And the picture that formed was no longer just clear, it was undeniable. This was not support, not contribution, not temporary. It was dependency, structured and reinforced over time. And now that dependency was starting to fail, not because I had changed, but because the system required more than it could sustain. And as I sat there looking at the records spread out in front of me, one thought settled in with absolute clarity. If it could be proven, it could be challenged, and if it could be challenged, it could end. By the time everything came together, it did not feel like a dramatic turning point. It felt inevitable, like a conclusion that had been building quietly through every shift, every transfer, every recorded detail I had kept without anyone noticing. And the courtroom looked exactly like I remembered from that first moment, controlled, structured, everything in its place, except this time I was not standing there. Unsure I was prepared. My father sat across from me, with the same composed posture he always carried, but there was tension in the way his fingers tapped once against the table before going. Still, my mother avoided looking directly at me, her attention fixed, somewhere just past my shoulder, and Olivia sat beside them, quieter than I had ever seen her. The confidence replaced with something uncertain, something that did not know how to exist in this space, and when my name was called earlier, not as a daughter, not as a role, but as a party. In the case, something shifted permanently, not just for them, but for me, because this was no longer about family. It was about facts, records, structure, everything I had built in silence, now laid out in a format that could not be dismissed. Every hour, worked every dollar, transferred every message, every demand, all aligned, consistent, undeniable. I did not need to speak much. I did not need to argue. The document spoke with a clarity I never had to raise my voice to achieve. The judge reviewed everything slowly, deliberately, asking questions, not about emotion, but about sequence, about responsibility, about control, and each answer reinforced what had been hidden in plain sight for years, that what they called support was actually dependency placed on me without consent, that what they framed as temporary had no defined end, that what they expected was not reasonable contribution, but continuous sacrifice. And when the final moments came, it was quiet again. The same kind of silence as before, but different, heavier final. The judge closed, the file looked up and said, my name once more clearly, without hesitation, affirming what the records had already proven, that I was not obligated in the way they claimed, that the financial responsibility placed on me had no legal standing, that everything I had given was not something they could continue to demand, and I felt something settle inside me, not relief, not victory, just clarity, clean and precise, like a line finally drawn where it should have been all along. I did not look at them right away. I gathered my documents carefully, placed them back into the folder the same way I had done countless times before, controlled, deliberate, and only then did I stand, and as I turned to leave, I heard my name again. Softer, this time not from the judge, but from behind me, familiar voices trying to reach across something that no longer existed the way it used to. I did not stop. I did not turn around, because everything that needed to be said had already been recorded, documented, confirmed. And if you have ever found yourself in a situation where you were expected to carry more than your share, while someone else benefited, comment number 1. If you have ever seen a similar story unfold in another family, comment number 2, and if you believe no one should have to go through something like this, comment number 3, or share your own perspective, because stories like this are more common than people think, and sometimes the difference between staying trapped and moving forward is simply recognizing pattern for what it is, and choosing to document it instead of denying it.